Paul Hughes, Chief Executive Officer of Newcastle Airport. Welcome to Hunter Business Insider.
Thank you, and my pleasure.
Okay, well, we'll see how you feel at the end. Yes. You're coming on board at virtually the very start of Newcastle Airport. What surprised you about that as a product, as a position?
I think the first thing that surprised me was the region's propensity to travel. As we had new product coming in to our market, particularly with the advent of the low-cost airlines back in 2004, that the market took it up very, very strongly. And I guess what it reflected was the quality of our market. Number one, we have a very strong business region. Secondly, we have a very large population base, and we have some excellent tourism product here as well. So to be able to move people to and from our region and for them to take that up in droves basically has been a wonderful and surprising experience.
Surprise above your initial estimates?
I think the early days when the growth went from we had 200 odd thousand passengers back in 2003 to achieving 1.2 million last year is a fairly enormous growth curve.
And unique.
Yeah, and unique.
There's no other airport in Australia that would have experienced that problem.
No, not especially on a regional basis from where we're coming from. So that was quite, I guess, astounding in terms of the rate of growth. I think the growth wasn't surprising, but the rate of growth certainly was. So that was a real positive experience. And also a really good part of that was also marketing into other regions such as southeast Queensland and into the Melbourne region to get people to come to this region and enjoy all the advantages of the Hunter and Central Coast area in terms of what we have to offer.
Well, on the Central Coast they got into a bit of a lather there when they thought they might have their own airport. It appears that may have been snatched away from the Central Coast and put down back at Badgerys Creek. Is that over, that discussion, do you think, from your perspective?
No, I think that discussion will go on for a long, long time, and I guess until a decision's made. There's no doubt one day the whole region will need another airport. When that day is and what happens in the meantime is of more interest to us. And certainly we see that we have a strong role to play in supporting as an alternate gateway into New South Wales, into the large population region that we have. We service people from as far as the northern edges of Sydney, as well as the Central Coast and Hunter region itself. So we have a very large population. We service about 1.2 million people. So we think about those people and all the businesses in these regions. It's an enormous opportunity for us to actually do that better and create more connectivity, both interstate and internationally.
Where will the next 5 years of growth come from? Is it industry or is it tourism?
What we've actually seen in recent data is that while we've had general growth, about 2 or 3 years ago our market was predominantly visiting friends and relatives was about a third, and leisure was about a third of our market, so 1/3 was business. We're now actually seeing that about half of our growing base of users is actually business travellers. We're particularly seeing that on the Brisbane route, Newcastle to Brisbane. So, that is clearly driven by particularly the mining sector. We're seeing a lot of people moving between this region and the regions of Queensland. Recently Virgin just announced another 1,000 seats per week on the Newcastle-Brisbane route. So what we're going to see in the short term is more organic growth on the existing routes. We're also seeing Jetstar going to double daily on the Gold Coast route, which is also a positive. It means that the Australian domestic tourism scene, I guess, is improving from where it has been the last few years. Beyond that, we see our growth being to other states, particularly South Australia and Western Australia. All of our research data tells us that we have very strong demand for those routes right now.
If we could talk about the Central Coast, we're fans of what tourism is doing on the Central Coast, and it's one of its potential industries down there to grow rapidly. Is there enough conversation, do you think, between the airport and the tourism operators in the Central Coast?
I think there's always room for improvement in anything we do, but I think there's been strong liaison. I've been involved with Hunter Tourism, on the board of Hunter Tourism. There's always ongoing conversations with our neighbours around this region. Certainly the release of the state government's visitor economy task force, I think, is going to focus those discussions even more in the next few months as they understand what that report's implications might be, which is yet to be determined. But certainly what it does recognise is that we do need to have better access to our regional tourism product. So not necessarily competing against the capital city product, but actually having our own access and accessing those markets direct into this region. We see particular opportunity for the Central Coast and the Hunter regions is from the China market. And we very much are looking towards how we can work with that market, as a number of our actual operators in our markets currently are doing, to try and connect into that enormous market which is going to come to Australia. And we need to get our share.
We're a fan of clusters. Yep. Is there a tourism cluster that embraces? I know it's the Hunter Central Coast Tourism Awards.
That's correct.
And, I think I've probably got the answer. There's always room for improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think it's the old adage of your strength is also your weakness. Our strength in this area is our diversity. Wine, beaches, wonderful product we have around the place, lakes and all those types of things. The diversity is also our weakness because everyone's competing against each other as well. So what we have to make sure is we understand who our real competitors are, so that we actually build on the strength of the region and its diversity and not actually let it disintegrate because we're all competing against each other. So it's making sure we continually have that conversation about where the real opportunities are, and particularly when we talk about international tourism, how we can best market the diversity into those markets where people come and explore a whole range of things within an hour's drive of each other, and all of a sudden have some wonderful and unique experiences.
And the breadth of those experiences is extraordinary up here.
Oh, absolutely, and there's even other things such as the thoroughbred industry we have in the northern part of the upper Hunter part of our valley here. As I said, there's wonderful products of the Central Coast here on the Hunter Coast as well. So Port Stephens, the Barrington Tops, there's all sorts of unique experiences that we need to make sure that people can explore, and obviously some of the new unique experiences of being able to dive around the Central Coast and those things are all wonderful extra product which we can put to those broader markets.
Indeed, and we do need to know that we are aligned with alliances here and not competing against one another.
Absolutely, yeah, and we've just got to understand that we are competing in a bigger marketplace, and the better we can actually do that together, the more efficient and effective we'll be in achieving that.
Left field. My understanding is Newcastle Airport can never be international. Is that true, or what's your?
No, we're certainly working on international.
Okay.
Straight away. We have been international.
Right.
We were international airport in 2001. There were flights to New Zealand. That ceased in 2001 through to some, I guess, unusual circumstances of the day. We've been flying to Norfolk Island until recently. That was deemed to be an international flight as well.
Yeah.
So what we're now doing is we're actually working on some terminal improvements so we can actually look at flying back into New Zealand in the first instance. Our master plan that we did back in 2006 actually shows that we have clear demand and opportunity to fly direct into Asia ultimately. So that's what we're planning on. We've already completed our international aircraft parking apron. That was a cost of $10 million. We did that a few years ago as part of our overall master plan for our development. So we're looking at the terminal we need to create to make those opportunities real.
Okay. Now back to some of our questions.
Yep.
Paul, the next 12 months, to be specific, have you got some goals there and some strategies that you'd like to see unfold?
Absolutely. From the airport point of view, we're very much looking at, as I said, organic growth on our existing routes, and at the moment we're really competing very strongly for aircraft capacity, which is quite scarce in Australia, strangely.
What do you mean by that? Yeah.
Number of aircraft that airlines actually have. We see the major airlines at the moment actually leasing aircraft to fill capacity gaps, and that's again driven predominantly by the mining sector. So when we actually are looking to attract the airlines and put additional aircraft on existing routes or new routes, they are also considering whether they could be deploying those aircraft to other places such as the mining states of Queensland and Western Australia. So it's a strong competition for that extra tin in the air, as we call it. Okay. So that's a real challenge for us, but we're working quite strongly, and we've had Virgin and Jetstar both announced recent capacity improvements, so we see that's a step in the right direction on existing routes. We really want to keep working and hopefully achieve over the next 12 months those additional routes into Adelaide and Perth, and we would like to really see the commencement of our terminal expansion for international opportunities as well, probably by 2014.
Okay, excellent. With regard to, I guess, things you may have wished to have done differently since you started. Do you look back and say, hey, that was a different strategy and we should have fulfilled that?
No real regrets at this stage. The two key elements of our strategy have been, number one has been our master plan, which we did in 2006. That has proved to be very robust over time, and we've been elementally achieving that master plan. And the second thing is, in 2009 we did a significant demand study to understand what our customers need and what our customers that we should be capturing are expecting from Newcastle Airport. And again, that's proven very, very valuable in talking to the airlines and having conversations with them. And we've just recently updated that data as well to make sure that we understand where the business drivers and the drivers of their whole aviation game are actually, how they relate to Newcastle as an opportunity into the future. And that's really paying dividends for us at the moment, and we believe will continue to do so in the future.
How important is understanding the customer, the business customer, the family and friends customer?
Oh, absolutely important, because what we need to show to the airlines is if they put the capacity onto a particular route, what's going to happen. They need to understand the yield opportunities for what sort of profits they're going to make. Variously, business will tend to pay more than, say, a leisure traveller or someone say visiting friends and relatives. They can be a bit more selective about when they choose their flights and what price they're prepared to pay. So we need to show that appropriate product and mix so that we can actually look to the airlines to say, well, this is where the opportunity lay, and understanding those customers and how we're going to respond in the marketplace. Also, from the airport's point of view, we need to understand what business we're not capturing. So how many
Where are the gaps now, do you think?
So the gaps are really people going to Sydney to either travel internationally or to connect to other places interstate. So what we're doing to encourage people is also to think about, you can fly from, say, Newcastle to Melbourne to go to Adelaide. You can fly from Newcastle to Brisbane to fly to New Zealand, if that suits you. Virgin has just improved their product so we can actually fly Newcastle to Brisbane and they can connect and go on to LA in America. So they're the types of opportunities, just through some smart scheduling and putting things into the market in the most appropriate way, will all of a sudden give our market that additional benefit they're looking for, rather than some of the other hassles, having to go to a large capital city, traffic hassles, larger airport hassles, all those types of things, which clearly is part of our customer service strategy that we have, is to make sure that we differentiate on those.
Being very polite about our Sydney airport, aren't you? The things you want to avoid. Indeed. No, it's cool. And yeah, well, you've got a customer here, so. Yeah. The opportunity, I guess, to say, right now, we'll give you the 60-second rant opportunity. What would you say needs to be done most quickly if you could address it right now?
To me, the big rant I have is around what I'd call visionary infrastructure. Our governments at the moment are struggling to provide the necessary infrastructure for growth. What we really need, I'd like to see, is something actually where we're not only meeting those agendas, but we're also thinking about some visionary infrastructure. The topic could be a fast train. That could be the visionary infrastructure. It creates its own whole set of economic circumstances in terms of the project, but also starts to open up regions as well in a whole new and different way. In some ways, from an aviation point of view, that project would compete against aviation. But we also see that it will provide opportunities to tap into markets in a far better way, particularly when we're talking about tourism and bringing international travellers in and how they can move from market to market very, very quickly. So I just think that I would really like to see governments actually start choosing some significant economic drivers in terms of visionary infrastructure, and really, rather than make it a political football, make it something which we can all focus on and really hopefully see some difference in the short to medium term.
We are fans of the very fast train, and RDA has, I've been surprised at the work that's been done there, because it's all very positive work, and indeed the Japanese experience, might stop, suggests while it is competitive to airlines, it is also just builds the flow. It just makes it so much more accessible.
Yeah, we agree, and we just see that we've had airlines who have come and said, we would like to fly into Newcastle internationally, but the connectivity to the major markets is far too slow. And we all know the anecdotal story of the train from Newcastle through the Central Coast to Sydney is 10 minutes slower than it was 30 years ago. So I guess we can aspire to a faster train, but I think we still need to have that visionary infrastructure goal, which starts when we think about decentralisation decentralisation of populations. We're talking about a more connected community through the NBN, so people can work from homes, not have to travel into the cities so often. All of a sudden you think about how the fabric of society is going to be put together in the future, and that would be a critical element in my view.
Who actually owns Newcastle Airport?
Newcastle Airport is on a defence parcel of land. We're part of RAF Base Williamtown. Now we have a 40-year lease from Department of Defence, and that lease is owned by Port Stephens and Newcastle councils jointly. Newcastle Airport Limited is a company which has vested in it the operation of that airport on behalf of the two councils and has its own independent skills-based board. What we have been working on recently is changing that structure to achieve a number of things. One is to create some separation from the councils in terms of how we structure our debt into the future. At the moment the debt sits on the council's balance sheet, and that's not necessarily appropriate in the circumstances, so the change in structure will actually allow the councils to allow the airport to borrow independent of the council's debt profile. The second part advantage of that would be that also that the councils can receive a dividend from the company, so they can actually get a dividend back into their communities for their ownership of the airport. And we see that as fundamentally important. The councils will still maintain majority ownership of the airport, but what it will also give them the option to do in the future, if they want to bring in a private investor into the airport to provide some additional equity for our growth plans into the future, then this new structure will allow that to happen. The current structure doesn't.
When we talk about percentages of business, we actually didn't talk about freight. Is that a potential?
Freight actually does go through Newcastle at the moment, but it's probably in a very modest way in terms of it's usually underbelly freight. That is, it flies under the belly of existing passenger aircraft. We do have a small freight facility there to handle those types of things. A lot of live produce and those types of things we need to get to market quickly and comes out of our region, goes through the airport. We're actually currently working with some freight handling companies to actually expand that facility. We're going to spend $500,000 this year just to improve our freight handling facilities, and we see that as being a continual growing step as we will move into more and more freight opportunities as time progresses. So certainly freight will be part of our overall business strategy.
We support you desperately.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
okay,
Paul.
thank you.